Thanks, Guilherme. I would like to thank, first of all, our participants in this session. And I would like to thank you all for staying. This is the last session. But come on, is there a better way to finishing 2 days of hard work than staying here, listen to someone talking about law? You don't need to answer, of course, but thank you for staying. Thank you for staying. Well, we have three completely different backgrounds and professional roles and functions here. We have someone coming from a company that develops software, apps, marketplace, which is Miguel. We have someone coming from the industry, in this case from the automotive industry area. And finally, we have a consultant, which is always good to have a consultant. The same as to have a lawyer, to have a consultant is always good. Well, and the funny thing is that we are here to talk about law, but none of you is a lawyer, which is a good sign, because we all know what lawyers think about law. We love the law. The more laws we have, the better, you know, we live from that. So it's not interesting to listen what lawyers think about the law. It's more interesting, I believe, for all of us to understand what people that have to deal with the law in the day-to-day activity think about the law. That's why we are here. Now, we have here a few questions. I will start with this first one. There are massive potential benefits for business who can leverage big data analytics to make better decisions and to improve their processes. But there are many laws ruling almost everything in our day-to-day activity. Do you think we have the most adequate laws when it comes to work with data? Is the law today a facilitator or an obstacle to someone working in data science? And we are talking about general laws. We go to the Gdpr, of course, later, but this is a first general question. I will start with you, Miguel.
Okay, thank you. Fernando, I don't know. No, it's working. Yeah. I think that the easy question is always to say that the law is an obstacle. It's something that is going to prevent you to do more things than the freedom of using data. I cannot not agree. I think it's not an option. The law is the law. It's to protect and to prevent. And normally, I have a case or a story that I can share with you. I was back in 2001, on September 11, I was a banker in the United States. Before September 11, we would ask few information from the customer. So we were entitled to request the name, the social security, and the address, just to give an example. So it was spark information that we could collect. In Portugal, it's more or less the same, so it was the same thing. If you have credits, you could ask for income statement or you ask more information, but that's it. After September 11, the law that came until now 17 years after, entitled you to demand a lot more information. Know your customer, asking questions that you could never ask before, having even transactional profiling. So by that time, the law enabled us to collect a lot more data that we kept, and we were mandated to collect, to prevent, and to help the system to protect from the fraud and from the attacks from the terrorists. And that is a good example that the law can work in our interest, can protect us on collecting that data. It was even worse. If you don't collect that information, you will be liable to answer in court because of that. So in the sense, I think that the law is something that has to be given. It's not an option. You have to always do your business legally. What we have is to identify how can we, following the law, benefit from that. What happened now is that we keep on collecting data, and you have at the bank, for instance, the bank is a good example of that. You have silos of information on the compliance, money laundering, and all those departments that collect a lot of information that you don't share with the marketing department. So it's legal information, it's information that you keep, information that you can use, and you don't use it because you only collect that for the purpose of protecting from the terrorists and from the transactional behavior. I think that in the end, we have to always look at the law as something that will help and to prevent ones from doing bad things, but also to help and to mandate others to follow and be entitled and legitimate to use that data in our protection. So I think that's my opinion about the
Okay.
If common sense was easier, yes, but common sense is not common. So that's the problem that there is. We need the law to make us follow the law.
Okay, so first approach. Eric, what's your opinion about this?
So I think the law and society is moving slower than data, right? The advancements we have in data science and in the internet are just moving miles quicker than the lawmakers can keep up with. The fundamental question of law, right, is whose law and within which jurisdiction, right? Laws tend to be bounded by geographical and political constructs that are pretty old. I don't know how old the Portugal is as a nation, right? But your borders have been in there for a while, right? The internet doesn't have borders, data doesn't have borders, data can be moved around. The European Union and America think about data in completely different ways. If you have a history like Germany's, you have a very different approach to privacy, right? East Germany and privacy, right? That America just simply doesn't think about, right? And thinks about life in a much more contractual way, right? Whereas many parts of the European Union think about like data in a kind of human rights sort of way. So the fundamental question of the law and about where are the boundaries of jurisdiction is completely I think they're behind the ball on that, right? What was the question again? I've lost myself.
Is that in fact the law that we have, and we are talking about that exactly, is that a challenge or opportunity, or is this a limitation? Do we have the right laws that we need to deal with data as we deal today? This is the question.
Okay, I have a suspicion that the thing that really perhaps should give data scientists put a limit on what they do, but in fact does not, is just kind of uncertainty among the practitioner community as to exactly what the law is. I mean, in some senses like GDPR, it's becoming kind of clearer and quite straightforward, but just around, what is the law around bias within algorithms?
But do you think, for instance, that one of the problems of the law is because the law is created mainly by legal people and not by people, in fact, involved in the technical part of the matters that the law has to deal?
So,
is that really a problem or no? Does this happen?
I certainly think that if you combine, all the parties that are involved in creating the law, so that's not just lawyers, that's politicians, that's the media. Tend not to be very well versed in the technical issues that are involved, and in fact often talking about things that are just, the horse has bolted, right? That it's already gone, right? A lot of things have already just happened, and that's the way we do things.
Okay. Bruno.
So I start with your words. It's funny for you to be in a panel discussing law without lawyers. During the last year, it was also funny to me to be in a panel discussing security only with lawyers. So it's kind of a revenge, and it's very good. It's very good to be here. I always like that sentence that say that the more corrupt the state, the more number of laws it have. And the correlation of corruption and law, it's somehow related with the sense that the laws can stop or allow people to move forward. It's kind of a way of putting people almost like educating people. And this is challenging because I think I never said it in English, but I'm from Sintraline. It looks perfect. And K100, it looks wonderful, K100, we call it Kassain. And there's this common sense that say the ugly part is not to steal, it's to be caught. And it's not even to be caught, it's to be judged. And nowadays, it's not even to be judged, it's to be condemned. So at the end of the day, answering your question, the number of laws, for me, my conviction is important because more laws normally are going after things that already don't exist in reality. Because if we go directly to the enterprise environment, we are discussing about a subject that is data law. But there's no data law for a company. A company is a system, is a number, is a brand. And there's so many laws that at the same time are affecting the same company. More, there are so many regulations that are affecting the same company at the moment. And when I listen to the laws, and laws are coming in a period of time, and I look to companies, and companies actually don't prepare themselves to have a system, a life system, to deal with laws, whatever it means. So I'm talking directly about compliance. I'm talking about improving the compliance of companies in a way that we can almost go to a culture perspective. And culture is what people do when no one is looking to them. And laws will never solve this, will never stop people for doing things. And the last years, what it senses, states, I don't know if generally European or local, are trying to educate people with laws. And I don't believe that people and companies can be educated with laws. So when we come to subjects like data, like security, people are not educated. People actually don't understand their rights because they don't understand what is data. It's not because they don't understand the rights. They don't understand the threats related with security. They don't understand what is a hacker. They don't understand that Portugal no longer stops in Badajoz. Portugal is everywhere where there's internet protocol. They can come from everywhere. So I think more laws are trying to frame something that is not frameable. So the challenge is how can we solve this? It's about responsibility. It's everything somehow prepared. What I try to do in companies is for many years to discuss what we call GRC and put in the same line governance, risk, and compliance in the same way of seeing it. And there's a wonderful tool that so many companies pay attention to that is prepared by Institute of Internal Auditors called the 3 lines of defense. That basically put in a sense that in order to something to act, it's not only about what the people do in the management, in the operation. It's about to have a second line concerned about legal, security, risk aspects, and the third line related with audit. And what we see is that in companies nowadays, is still the feeling that some work and others do risk, and others do law, and others do security. And at the end of the day, we don't have security by design, we don't have actually responsibility by design. So people outside keeps doing laws and more regulations, but companies are not changing, are just answering point to point. So I think it's a bigger problem, but for companies is actually, for me, my perspective, a GRC problem.
Okay, but as you mentioned, the market is global.
Yep.
It's the old word that the
Yep.
laws are national. In Europe, the situation is that in fact we are creating laws in Europe like the Gdpr, which are much more demanding than other laws in other countries like the United States,
Yeah,
as you
yep,
mentioned.
yep.
Is that an advantage, a difficulty for European companies? How can we, in fact, rule something that is global
Yep.
with local laws? And the problem is, if this is a problem, we are creating in Europe so complex and sophisticated laws that
Yep.
probably we may need it. I don't know. I'd
Yep.
like to have your
Yep.
opinion. But the fact is that from the competitive point of view, is that a good thing for European
Yep.
companies or not when we have to fight with Chinese, Americans that in fact don't have the same laws that we have? What do you think with you?
My perspective, and see it in a positive way. I truly believe that when countries and Europe try to do new laws, they are trying to keep this, what we can call the European culture, okay? The European way of thinking, our tradition, our history. What they normally forget is that nowadays we also are global. We are living in Europe, but we are aware of a much more wider country. So what for me it's important is that I do believe that if a citizen really wants to have their rights protected, they will do it not because there's a big, huge law protecting, but because he's educated. He has a civil culture. He was prepared in school to pay attention to his rights, first. The second one is, I do believe in market. I do believe that if actually a client or a citizen is bad treated by a company, will change to the other company. And actually this way of seeing people able to think in their rights, able to choose by companies, able to, in a way, I will not buy you this and I will give you this penalty. Not by law, I don't want to wait 10 years so the judge or some judge will say, I will pay this, the fine. I want to think that people are more informed than the number of laws make us think we are. And at the end of the day, I do feel that sometimes that law, it's not what I have in my mind as a user of internet. The people around me don't care about it, And I wonder, who cares about it? Because if we listen to people, and I listen to lots of people, it's very few the number of people that actually is involved in this. The other people are aware, are doing things, are changing from one telecom provider to another, and they are doing their lives without thinking, I will fight this with this company for the next 10 years. So I think there's a way of protecting culture, or must be a way of protecting culture more related with education and awareness than with laws.
Harry, your company is a good example. You work with all the world at Jaguar Land Rover. Is that a problem for European companies to have to be compliant to European laws more demanding than the other ones in the other parts of the world? You never thought about it?
No, I don't think particularly in terms of regulation. I think it's a problem for European competitiveness.
Yeah.
You know, so at the risk of being a British person sounding skeptical about the European Union, it is. I think it's anti-competitive, right? They're embarrassed that there's no European Google, there's no European Amazon, there's no European Facebook, there's no European Twitter, there's no European anything in that scale. You've got Chinese versions, but you don't have European versions, and a bunch of lobbyists have closed the drawbridge and think that by wishing away the innovation problem, they can exclude people who are doing better than them. And I think that is a worry for European competitiveness.
Yep. Miguel?
I kind of agree with the education, but I think that we can never prevent people from trusting from brands, service engines that they feel that is that trustable, and we can never prevent not having hacking behind that, Cambridge Analyticals. No one was thinking that we were being exposed. So I think that the laws in the end, I agree with you that we have to select an open market. We can go wherever we want. We have to have education to select which ones we feel better and we trust the most. But the problem is that sometimes you are caught in the middle. So you are surprised,
Yep.
hello, and that's something that you need the law to be there, to regulate that. If it's the law, if it's too much here in Europe than in China, I think that we, as a, I don't want to call it developed country, but at least have been here for a long time, we have to hope for a better world. We cannot level down. We cannot say, because in China they don't use it, we should do the same. I think that is dangerous, because in the end, we're going to destroy and we're going to expose more. So we have to have the balance. We cannot be obsessed by blocking, by closing. We have to aim to grow, to have opportunities, to build, to create value, but we have to balance those things. I think it's important to keep it it's not a Far West, or it's not the Texas that we can just do whatever we want. I think it's dangerous to go on that avenue.
Very well. Well, you have mentioned already GDPR, and GDPR is something that is now very relevant in all the entities, companies, public entities, and so on. And in fact, GDPR is focused on the individual. The protection of the individual, the citizen, the consumer, the data belongs to the consumer. The fact is that we are treating data on a different scale. We are talking about big data. And my question is, the focus on the individual can still be maintained when we are dealing with big data and not with individuals, each one at each time. Personal data as a concept is still adequate to serve as a basis for data regulation in big data. What do you think about that, starting with you probably, Harry?
So when you talk about big data and millions of rows or billions of rows or trillions of rows or whatever, right? Each row is still an individual or an individual transaction or whatever. And you know, one of the great advantages of technology is that it's scalable, right? So to the extent you can look after one person's rights, you can look after many, many people's rights. You know, you buy a few more processors, you have a bit more processing time, a bit more memory, you can do that. I think that it is, you know, the logical unit of responsibility has got to, in the end, be an individual, a person, right? It's still all about people at the end of the day. That's the sort of the big swing in the way that people are conceptualizing the ownership of data, right? Is that it isn't Facebook's, it's kind of ours, right? The balance commercially, and the thing that perhaps the law is yet to really recognize, is that Facebook have invested enormously in creating that data, right? We call it our data, but they've created it, right? They've given the platform.
Who holds the data at the end of the day? It's Facebook or each one of the individuals?
Well, at the moment, the prevailing idea is that it's owned by each one of those individuals, and you have to then create some kind of Byzantine way of mapping between a large data set and lots of individuals. From a social good point of view, perhaps we'd be better to say that nobody owned it, and that therefore Facebook had to make it available to everyone in some kind of anonymized form, and then we could be creating all sorts of data products and perhaps combating the monopoly issues that Europe, for example, have with some of these big American providers, right? It would be better to say that nobody owns the data and make it free access to everyone in the same way that Linux is, right? And Git,
open source.
Rather than say individuals own it and then create this whole problem of then tracking how the value of that data is being exploited.
Yeah.
Miguel.
I kind of agree, because we have to keep it, a lot of applications that we use, you want to keep it personal. If you're going to run on Runkeeper, you want to compare with your neighbor, so you cannot escape from the ownership and the PII of the information. So you want to be identifiable, you want to be yourself. And I agree with that make it democratize the access. So if I want to make it public, it should be shared with everyone. I think it's a good option to apply that. It's not escaping from anonymization, it's not escaping from the ownership. It's just share it, but share it with everyone. I think it's a good option.
I think it was terrible to call it a data protection regulation. And why is that? It's because it's not about data. The most concerning part of GDPR is that people forget that it's still about privacy of people. It's at the end, it's about of a company not knowing if I'm sad, if I don't want the company to know if I'm sad. It's not about the company have my email, because I know the company have my email. So just stop, everyone just stop to think about the rights they have to protect their feelings, their location, their religion. That is privacy. And in the middle of, okay, but this is data protection security, my perspective is people just forgot that. And when we come to big data, what I feel, and I can give you the most stressful example that I have, and I'm still stressed with that because the consequences didn't come yet. That was this company that actually was a manufacturing company, and they had a team of people discussing GDPR, and the only database they found with the personal data was the age or the date of birth of the sons and daughters of the employees, and if it was a boy or a girl. So what should we do? It's about data. Action, eliminate that information. And in the next 25th of December, all the sons and daughters will receive the same gift. So they will stop believing Santa because of GDPR. And this is the perfect example. That company was not doing anything that the owners of the data don't know they were doing. The second level is, I have the right to have a company to know if I am sad. If I agree, they send me joyful music when I'm sad. So this is still a business to use big data. So they can use that information to know my feelings if I know they are knowing my feelings. And that is wonderful, and we still keep thinking about that. Innovation, new ways, new business. That's why all the world is doing. But what is happening in Europe? No, it's better not. The fines are there. So stop innovation. They are very high. So at the end of the day, the only part of it is like, it's not culture, companies don't have culture, but like companies' profile, that is what companies do when we are not looking at. And that's, I think, a very, very small number of companies. A very short number of companies that when I'm sad, they will try to sell me something because they know that I'm sad. Because most of the companies, I do like to believe that if I'm a client and they want to do everything for their clients, they want me to be happier. They don't want to take advantage of me. The huge majority of companies. So if we are doing laws just for the small number of companies that are doing bad, the majority of companies that are doing good, they don't have laws that protect them. And that is what concerns me more. It's like, at the end of the day, the companies that don't want to don't want to respect me will not respect me anyway. They will just gamble. They will, okay, let's see if I'm get caught. And worst, the hackers, the cyber criminals, they will not comply with GDPR. So who will be penalized with this? The good old companies that are paying lots of money. And actually, what I see is, let's stop doing innovation. Let's do it doing big data, because at the end of the day, it's so high risk that I don't want to have it. And I think the goodwill of the law was amazing. When the law just came out, of course, I understood all the bad sides because I'm a positive guy. I just, for example, saw that the mindset of the the legislator was to have a wider Europe, to allow Portuguese companies to go sell in a digital single market with one law. And how many companies, Portuguese companies, you saw after GDPR being excited, like, now I can go to Spain, now I can go to France, now I can sell in a digital single market because there's one law for one people that's called European people. And unfortunately, because I saw 0 companies doing this, I'm very concerned the impacts of this type of law.
Well, these are very interesting points. We have only 1 minute left. Yeah. So my last question is, what would be your advice for data scientists working with big data, these personal data and so on, in order to be compliant, or at least try to be compliant on the safe side of the law? Starting with you, Miguel.
I think that one of the things that we should start is the purpose. So we have to really clear when we're manipulating data, when we are using data, what is the purpose of using that data, and clearly state that to the customer. I think that I'm going to use your data because I'm looking for this solution, for this, helping you with something. So that will help a lot, at least for us to have the conscience that we are doing this for this purpose. Even if that purpose in the end might be a different one. Yesterday we assisted to some ethic kind of discussions. If after you get to the solutions or the conclusions, what you're going to do with that might be another challenge, but at least to have that in mind in the beginning, I think it's important to clearly that. I don't want to go to even, just a good example that Bruno mentioned, the cost for the companies and the cost for the consumers. I go to the laundry and I have to sign a form contract that a lawyer made to leave my phone for them to call me when the shirts are clean. If I go to the dentist and you need to keep your records, so you have to sign a form. So there is a cost involved. So if they clearly state this is the purpose of using and the only use is for the business purpose, and you have to accept by default, it's going to be easier. So I think if those two things clearly state what's the purpose of the company, what was the purpose of the data manipulation, it will help a lot on not having that appetite in the end to use it differently or to use it not for the purpose that was meant to.
Harry, what would be your advice?
So in any company, you'll have lots of people telling you what you have to do, and I guess you just have to do it. But what I'd say is data scientists engage with not just the law as it is, but the law as it becomes. It's changing an enormous amount. And the quality of public debate around these issues is very low, tends to be dominated by the person with the loudest voice, the most paranoid person, the most boring and annoying person, right? They're all out there trying to have their say and get their media, their seconds in the spotlight by being involved in a live debate. And if you're too keen to avoid that, we'll end up with a lot of really rubbish laws. I think we need to be involved in that debate because there just aren't very many people who actually even know what we do, who are involved in legislating for us.
Very well. Bruno.
Yeah, what normally I say, it was so quick from the moment that we stopped to have data that support business to business that is data. And that is probably the one thing that I say more when I listen, for example, the data governance. Okay, there's one thing that is data governance that the guys, data science, need to be very attention. But when they are dealing with information from clients, there's a corporate governance. They need to pay attention first. Because at the end of the day, you don't need to be a data scientist. You can select something, and you will be blamed by doing it if you are not paying attention for having a governance management level that actually is accountable for what you are doing. So the advice that I give to you, I give everyone that is in a more technical level is don't try to be heroes. Don't try to do things without having a proper level of accountability behind you. Because at the end of the day, something good and something bad that will not happen internally in the company, will have a huge impact. And we can be heroes like until the moment that everything goes very perfectly. And for a very small, very, very small, tiny thing, one feeling of one client, we can destroy it all. So always pay attention not only for data governance, but wider corporate governance, IT, enterprise IT governance. It's bigger than just data. It's about the system that calls company.
Very well. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you for staying. Thank you.